we need to talk. What did I do? What happened? Is this the end? It is the classic story of the Sunday Night Alchemist. We treat ourselves like a malfunctioning piece of machinery that requires permanent maintenance. And just like that, you turn your life into an exhausting psychological project called me. Pop spirituality tells us about quantum shifting into timelines where we are already rich, healed, and enlightened, but then the alarm rings on Monday morning. There it is. You heard it. And if you heard it, it means that you are not it. Behind this quantum trend hides a highly refined, deeply sophisticated form of spiritual bypassing. And here is where the physics of this field becomes critical. This is where the whole illusion finally collapses. You don't need a fictional savior from a distant quantum timeline to come and clean up your life. Fire the internal manager. Let's do this right now. By the way, if you catch me mispronouncing a word here and there, don't worry, it's just part of the charm. Usually it doesn't get in the way of the core message, but if it does, or if a phrase sounds a bit tangled, just hit me up in the comments and we'll untangle it together. Let's dive in. Think about that holy, mystical entity known as the Monday morning version of you. We've all spent time with this character. It's Sunday night around 10 p.m. You are lying on your couch, doom scrolling on your phone, maybe ordering a late night pizza, but mentally you are operating as an absolute visionary. In your mind, you are fully convinced that the version of you waking up tomorrow at 6 a.m. is going to be a completely different biological specimen. That person is going to spring out of bed without hitting snooze, drink green juice, meditate for 20 minutes, and attack the day with the laser-focused productivity of a Silicon Valley CEO. It is the classic story of the Sunday Night Alchemist, frantically trying to alchemize the pure gold of an ideal life out of a cold piece of leftover pizza. But then the alarm rings on Monday morning. You open your eyes and there is no quantum leap. There is no enlightened savior. There is only the exact same body with the exact same biological rhythms, the same tight shoulders, the same exhaustion, and the exact same old mental loops. You are left stare to stare with your raw reality at 6 a.m., feeling even more depleted because the fantasy just evaporated. Why does this trick never work? Because we believe so deeply in this mythic future savior, our present self starts taking out massive emotional and physical loans. We leave the dishes in the sink, we procrastinate on the hardest projects, we run away from uncomfortable conversations. Why? Because there's this idealized, ultra-competent other waiting in the future who will easily clean up the mess. And this isn't just a personal bad habit. The entire self-improvement industry and the concept of chasing a better version of yourself rests on one massive and challenged fallacy: the assumption that you are a fixed, stable, solid object that can be repaired, upgraded, or optimized. We treat ourselves like a malfunctioning piece of machinery that requires permanent maintenance. But if you look closely at your direct experience, what exactly are you trying to fix? Your personality, your reactions, your habits, your thoughts? Look at them. They are constantly flowing, shifting, and changing. The version of you from 5 years ago doesn't live here anymore. Even the person you were last summer feels like a character from a movie you barely remember. Your tastes evolve, your beliefs transform, your emotional patterns reconfigure. So what is this rigid, solid me that supposedly needs a lifelong renovation? It's not an identity, it's just a narrative, a story you've repeated to yourself so many times that it calcified into your perception. I am an anxious person, I have an avoidant attachment style, I am not confident enough, I am lagging behind. These statements feel as solid as granite, but they are just thoughts. And the moment this mental construct solidifies, the mind immediately hires an internal manager, a taskmaster who says, okay, this object is defective, it needs to be optimized, we must strive toward the future self. And just like that, you turn your life into an exhausting psychological project called me. And if you think this corporate managerial approach to self-development is exhausting, wait until you see what happens when the spiritual community gets a hold of it. Lately, this psychological project has taken an even weirder, more sophisticated turn. If you open social media, you'll see that we are no longer just told to visualize our goals. Now, people are doing tarot readings on behalf of their future self. Pop spirituality tells us about quantum shifting into timelines where we are already rich, healed, and enlightened, urging us to tune into the vibrations of this future version who is supposedly sending us signs, breadcrumbs, and mental letters from across the space-time continuum. It sounds great, but let's peel back the spiritual glitter. Behind this quantum trend hides a highly refined, deeply sophisticated form of spiritual bypassing, a total rejection of reality and profound refusal to accept who you are right now. The ego has simply manufactured a new pristine illusion. Instead of meeting the only human being who actually exists, the one sitting in the chair right now who might be tired, confused, carrying unexpressed grief or raw anxiety, the ego projects a sterile, unblemished phantom into the future and demands that we spend our lives serving it. You think you are tuning into the frequency of your highest future self, but in reality, what frequency are you actually listening to? You are just listening to the same old habitual internal voice that has been narrating your life since childhood. Try to catch this verbatim right now, in this very moment. Think about the most mundane part of your day. Maybe you're walking to the kitchen to pour a glass of water, or you're zipping up your jacket before heading out, or you're standing at a bus stop staring into space. In all these automated actions, there is almost always one common denominator: an internal dialogue. It's as if someone inside is constantly commentating on everything, arguing, judging, predicting, chewing on the past. We're so used to this internal radio that we completely mistake this voice for who we are. But if you look closely, you'll notice something strange. If I am the one thinking the thought, how can I simultaneously hear it? And if I can hear the thought, who is the one speaking? You can only hear a sound if there is a distance between you and the source. So if you are the one hearing the thought, who is generating the noise? Who is the I behind the sound? It's like sitting next to a chatty neighbor in a movie theater. The film is playing, but this guy next to you won't shut up. Oh look, the hero is making a mistake here. Watch out, there's going to be a plot twist. Wow, that must be a metaphor for something. You can't actually immerse yourself in the movie because you are constantly forced to listen to this commentary. This is a precise metaphor for how most of us live. We think we are the ones speaking, but the truth of your direct experiences, you are the one listening. So when you sit down in meditation to channel your quantum future self, guess who shows up to talk? The chatty neighbor. The ego simply takes its current deficits, its fears, its unfulfilled ambitions, wraps them in a shiny new concept called the highest version of me, and keeps its endless monologue going. Let's make a tiny crack in this familiar illusion right now. You don't need to meditate, just stop for a second and listen. What is the very next thought that arises while you are listening to this podcast? Maybe it says, what is she talking about? Or interesting, or I wonder if I'm doing this right. There it is, you heard it. And if you heard it, it means that you are not it. Thoughts are just events passing through the space of the mind, and your future self is just one more thought you've been conditioned to listen to. And this is where the whole illusion finally collapses, because if you stay in that silence long enough, you realize the ultimate truth. There is no thinker, there is no speaker, and there isn't even a listener. There is only the thought itself, a raw burst of energy appearing out of nothing, dancing for a second and dissolving back into the void. You are not the radio, and you are not the person listening to it. You are the space in which the music happens. But realizing that you are the space is only the first step. To actually live in this space without being constantly dragged back into the drama, we need to understand how the gravity of the mind works. We need to look at the practical engineering behind these bursts of energy. When we look at the mind through this lens, it becomes obvious that thoughts are not things we deliberately manufacture. They are occurrences. To calm the frantic anxiety of the mind, it helps to understand the underlying mechanics of how these occurrences happen. In Eastern philosophy, the mind is often referred to as the subtle body. It acts as an energetic buffer, a precise layer between pure consciousness and the dense material world. Think of it like an electromagnetic field. As we discussed in the previous episode, if your thoughts are electrical charges and your emotions are magnetic poles, they constantly broadcast a distinct electromagnetic signature around you. This field is a highly sensitive space where raw energies take the shape of concrete thoughts. These thoughts are simply ripples of energy appearing in the subtle body, much like concentric circles expanding on smooth water when a leaf drops. We don't premeditate them, we don't consciously sketch them out. They ignite in the field of our attention as fully formed, prepackaged sparks. And here is where the physics of this field becomes critical. Think of a simple science experiment. You can actually Google it later just to see how beautiful and visual it is. If you scatter chaotic iron filings around a magnet, something extraordinary happens. They instantly begin to align into beautiful, perfectly ordered geometric patterns, shifting around something completely invisible. That's because there is an unseen magnetic field at play. And long before those iron filings were even dropped onto the surface, that geometric pattern already existed. You just couldn't see it. The filings didn't create the pattern, they simply made it visible. This is a clear demonstration of how matter organizes itself under the influence of an invisible force. First comes the field, then comes the form. What we perceive as solid matter is just the final, outermost expression of something unseen. The tragedy is that we live in a world that worships only what is visible. We look at matter after it has already taken shape, and we think that's the whole story. But in reality, physical matter is just the final footprint. It is the dense, frozen consequence of an active, invisible process that was already happening long before. And this isn't just a poetic metaphor, it is measurable reality. Back in the 1930s, Harold Burr, a neuroanatomist at Yale University, discovered something revolutionary. By measuring the electromagnetic fields around living organisms, he could detect the electrical signature of a disease, like a tumor, long before any physical symptoms actually manifested in the tissue. The blueprint of the illness was already active in the invisible field, weeks before the body caught up. This is where modern Western science is clumsily catching up to what ancient wisdom has practiced for many thousands years. Take Ayurveda, for instance. In Ayurvedic medicine, when a physical symptom finally shows up in your body, it isn't the beginning of a disease. It's already stage 4 out of 6. According to Ayurveda, illness builds silently. It begins as a brief emotional anomaly, a flicker of negative energy. If unchecked, it becomes a fixed psychological program. By stage 3, these toxic mental loops trigger invisible changes in your nervous and endocrine systems. You feel completely fine, you think you're healthy, but the unseen matrix is already shifting. It's only at stage 4, when toxins accumulate and physical pain finally strikes, that we wake up. By the time you can actually see it or feel it, you're just looking at the footprint left by a monster that has been walking through your house for months, years, sometimes decades. But we treat the pain as a sudden surprise, completely blind to the years of energetic architecture that built it. Today, modern epigenetics confirms this exact chain reaction. Science now knows that your thoughts and emotional frequencies act as cellular signals. A chronic state of fear or resentment floods your body with stress hormones, completely altering your internal chemistry. Your cells respond to this environmental field, turning specific genes on or off. Once again, the field dictates the form. Your body is just a loudspeaker playing the music of your hidden energetic patterns. Now let's apply this exact same physics to your mind. If your subtle body is heavily weighed down, clogged with old fears, unresolved emotional residue, unexpressed grief, or heavy memories, the thoughts passing through it will naturally be forged from the exact same low frequency. This is where the concept of frequency actually comes in. When we talk about frequency, we aren't talking about the cliché vibrations of love and abundance. We are talking about the literal physics of field conductivity. In physics, the heavier and more rigid a structure is, the lower its resonant frequency becomes. When our internal field is packed with stuck thoughts and blocked emotions, it becomes dense, heavy, and vicious. It drops into a low-frequency state. Fear, anger, resentment, and chronic anxiety are dense, highly turbulent vibrations. When thoughts arise from this space, they are born entirely out of accumulated defensive human conditioning. It's like looking at a beautiful landscape through a filthy, stained window. Everything outside appears distorted, dull, and threatening. Let's look at a hyper-specific example that every single person listening to this has experienced. Imagine you are going about your day and you suddenly receive a text message from someone important to you that reads, "We need to talk." If you pay close attention to your internal state in that exact millisecond, you can actually hear a physical racket inside your head. It's as if someone inside violently jumped out of their chair and started pacing the room screaming. About what? Why? What did I do? What happened? Is this the end? Your body reacts instantly. Your heart rate spikes, your shoulders lock, your chest tightens, and your breath becomes shallow and rapid. Now, step back for a second and analyze this. The 4 words "we need to talk" are fundamentally neutral. Objectively, they contain zero data. There are millions of reasons why 2 humans might need to talk. Yet the mental field is hit by a Category 5 hurricane. Why? Because your mind immediately activates its noisy archivist, the ego. The ego rips open its dusty filing cabinets, pulls out old movies where that phrase meant a breakup, or digs up past traumas where those words preceded getting fired, for instance. The mind slaps the label bad on the present moment, based entirely on past losses and suffering. This is the first source of thoughts, the ego, the false self. It is the persona, the mask, the defense mechanism. It is your internal guard dog, hardwired exclusively for survival. It scans the environment constantly, looking for threats. And because its baseline setting is survival, it sees threats everywhere. The ego always speaks first, and it speaks incredibly loud. It has no pause button, it cannot tolerate waiting, and it insists on recycling your past history with maximum theatrical drama. If you only ever listen to this first source, the world will always look like a minefield of danger, rejection, and mistakes. But there is a second source of thoughts, and you know it intimately even if it gets drowned out by the ego's loud theater. It's that strangely quiet voice that appears when you are completely relaxed, when you are walking aimlessly down the street, taking a warm shower, staring at the sky, or just drinking tea. It isn't even a voice, really. It's a soft, unhurried understanding. It doesn't demand, it doesn't terrify, and it doesn't judge. It feels like a clear light that simply illuminates things as they are. Often it manifests as intuition, a sudden clarity, what we call an intuitive knowledge, deep knowing without a logical explanation. This is not the ego. This is pure consciousness. Consciousness doesn't protect itself because it isn't governed by fear. It doesn't scan for threats, it sees reality nakedly as it is, neutral without slapping arbitrary labels of good or bad onto it. Life is just living itself. Events are just happening. Because it rests in this truth, the voice of consciousness is always profoundly still. When a person operates at these higher frequencies, in states of acceptance, deep peace, or quiet joy, the subtle body becomes clean and transparent. The internal space opens up, the static clears, and consciousness can shine through the mind effortlessly, like sunlight piercing pristine glass. When you are aligned like this, the thoughts that float into your mental field are completely different. They sound gentle, lucid, and wise. But why is it that most of us rarely inhabit this state? To answer that, we need to trace this entire sequence back to where it all begins. You see, your thoughts are not random, isolated events popping up inside your skull. Nor are they the product of a separate solid I. In fact, the I you think you are is actually just another thought. And we will get into the fascinating neurobiology of how the brain actually constructs this illusion in our upcoming episodes. But for now, let's look at how this happens on a felt energetic level. Thoughts, just like emotions, are chunks of energy passing through the field of the mind. And they can only conform to the invisible pattern that is already active in that field at any given moment. In a state of absolute purity, pure consciousness, there is no fixed pattern. There is only what quantum physics calls a field of potentials, or what mystical traditions refer to as the Great Void. In this state, thoughts and emotions are not solid objects. They are simply fluid waves, temporary weather. A thought arises, I need to buy bread, triggers a natural necessary action if needed, and gently drifts away like a cloud. An emotion swells up, a brief flash of irritation from a loud noise, for instance, signals a temporary shift in environment and melts within 30 seconds. The action happens, the experience passes, but the field remains pristine. The field remains pristine because there is no emotional hook to catch that wave and freeze it. The rigid pattern only appears when fixation occurs, and 99.9% of us live inside the rigid pattern because that is exactly what the ego does. It creates a fixation. Most of us have been conditioned since childhood to live permanently in the noise of trauma, social programming, and survival tactics. Our subtle body gets packed with dense, heavy static. This heavy psychological static takes the living fluid flow of reality and literally freezes it, turning a passing wave into a rigid permanent construct. I never have enough money, or the world is a dangerous place. And then physical reality follows. Matter literally sticks to those frozen low-frequency blocks, exactly like iron filings sticking to the invisible field around the magnet, forcing the hidden internal pattern to map itself into physical form. It's a flawless, predictable law of physics. This internal field is a dynamic matrix. For one person, the inner grid is woven from programs of scarcity and rigid control. For another, it's made of constant need for approval and the fear of rejection. Everyone runs their own unique, messy kaleidoscope. And it needs to be wiped clean, just like wiping dust off a mirror, so it can reflect light again. But how do we actually wipe that mirror? You don't need a spiritual cloth, you just need to look. In this inner landscape, the act of seeing is the act of cleaning. The moment a subconscious program is brought into the light of awareness, the physics of the field changes instantly. A dense, rigid knot like "I have to be perfect to be loved" begins to untie. The static clears and the field opens up. By dissolving these rigid structures, you are shifting the field into a high-frequency state, a state of pure conductivity where energy can flow without resistance and the nervous system can finally drop out of survival mode. That very emptiness we're looking for starts to emerge. This gradual, gentle, and more often than not painful unraveling is what real spiritual growth actually means. It's a literal deep clean. This is exactly why humanity invented prayers, mantras, breathwork, movement, and sound. They aren't magical tickets to heaven. They are simply somatic tools to clear the energetic static and restore the high conductivity of your mind. Even a single slow, deliberate exhale or a few moments of intentional silence act as a profound purification. Today we use psychoanalysis, neurobiology, and quantum physics for the exact same purpose: to wipe the dust off the mirror so it can reflect light again. The ultimate goal is to clean the field completely. Because when the field is clear, there is no rigid, distorted grid of old traumas for energy to get trapped in. Thoughts and emotions will still arise, because that's what energy does, but they simply pass right through the space of your mind without leaving a scratch. They have nothing to catch onto. The thoughts are still sounding, but they no longer hook you. The emotions rise, but they don't hijack you. You stop turning temporary energy into a physical illness, and you stop turning a passing thought into a permanent identity. There is no single magic prescription for this. Every nervous system has its own unique design, its own way of clearing its buffer. The key is to experiment, stop following other people's rigid spiritual recipes, and listen to that vast internal space. It always instinctively knows what it needs to return to silence. And this brings us straight to the ultimate illusion of the future self. We've been conditioned to think of our future self as a separate, upgraded version of us living somewhere down the timeline. A magical version who finally has it all figured out, who is perfectly calm, wise, and complete. We think we need to build a bridge to reach that person. But in the physics of consciousness, your future self is not a destination in time. It is simply the state of the field that is clear of static right now. That ideal future you is nothing more than current consciousness operating at its natural high-frequency conductivity, unfiltered by ego programs. You don't need to reach them. You just need to clear the dust that's blocking them. So where does this leave us? If there is no fixed, solid entity to repair, and if your future self is just a shiny carrot the ego dangles to keep you running on the self-improvement treadmill, what do you actually do? How do we practically begin to distinguish between those two sources, between the artificial static of ego programs and the clear conductivity of consciousness in the massive theater of our daily lives? You just stop doing surgery on the ghost. You turn to the ultimate diagnostic tool instead. The good news is you don't need a PhD in philosophy or a decade in an ashram. This tool is already hardwired into your biology. Your physical body is an incredibly honest instrument. It reacts instantaneously, long before your logical mind can formulate an excuse. You simply look at a thought and ask, does this thought contract me, or does it expand me? A thought born from the ego will always trigger a contraction. Imagine looking at your phone and realizing a crucial person hasn't texted you back. The old habit is to let your mental autopilot take over. The mind screams, they are pulling away, I did something wrong. Your body goes into a rigid survival spasm. You feel your heart rate quicken, your shoulders creep up toward your ears, or a sudden tightness in your gut. The ego lives in scarcity and defense, so its thoughts literally lock your biology into survival mode. A thought born from pure consciousness, however, brings expansion. Expansion feels like an immediate organic release. Imagine that exact same moment with a blank phone screen, but this time you operate from awareness. The quiet, unbothered realization drops in. They are just busy right now, or maybe simply, I am okay no matter what. There is no panic behind it. There is no accusation, urgency, or blame. Right there in front of that silent phone, your shoulders drop on their own, a subtle warmth spreads through your chest, your nervous system signs, and your breathing naturally deepens. Consciousness operates on the ancient principle of Wu Wei, the Taoist art of effortless alignment. It doesn't try to violently re-engineer the mind or build a better version of you. It lands as a simple, unshakable, quiet authority. I know. You don't need to perform surgery on your personality. You don't need to lease out your life to a fictional, idealized version of yourself in a distant timeline. You just need to clear the static so you can hear the frequency that is already clean, already whole, and already here. Let's do this right now. Wherever you are listening to this, whether you are driving, doing the dishes, walking down a busy street, or lying in bed, just find a way to make your physical body slightly more comfortable. Don't worry about the perfect spiritual posture. Don't try to straighten your spine like a yogi, just settle in. Take a deep, slow breath in and let out a long, unhurried exhale. Now mentally say to yourself these 8 words. Let everything be exactly as it is. The very moment you drop that phrase into your mind, your internal manager is going to panic. Instantly, the ego will spark a dozen anxious thoughts. Am I doing this right? What is this supposed to feel like? I have too much to do today to just sit here. Is my field clean enough? It will immediately try to slap its diagnostic labels on everything your senses catch, trying to lock your muscles back into a familiar contraction. But if you can wait just a tiny bit longer, literally just a few seconds without answering those thoughts, something extraordinary happens. The tension begins to melt like winter ice under the sun. A quiet, expansive space opens up right inside your chest. And inside that space, everything becomes remarkably simple. The thoughts are still sounding in the background, but they lose their grip on your nervous system. They don't hook you. Your emotions might still be rippling, but your body no longer buys into the emergency. The physical relaxation becomes thick, tangible, and alive. And in that quietude, you suddenly realize the ultimate truth of the entire season. You have always been infinitely larger than the contraction you were holding. This isn't an artificial state of enlightenment that you need to build or achieve. It is not a destination your future self will finally arrive at after another 100 hours of meditation or another shelf of self-help books. This is your default settings. This is the natural, expansive state of awareness which was always here, buried beneath the heavy psychological static. It is a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice. But as you continue to soften that rigid internal story of who you think you are, you will start noticing this physical expansion bleeding into the most mundane scenes of your life. One day, you will be splashing cold water on your face in the morning, or you'll be opening a window to let the fresh air into the room, or you'll be simply moving a coffee mug from one side of the table to another, and suddenly a strange, beautiful sensation will wash over you. Your shoulders will drop, your jaw will relax, it will be perfectly quiet inside. The mind will still be full of thoughts, but you won't be trapped inside it. The world will be moving, but your body won't be frantically chasing it. Everything will be happening entirely on its own, softly, effortlessly, naturally. You don't need to be reconstructed. You don't need to be upgraded. You don't need a fictional savior from a distant quantum timeline to come and clean up your life. The light is already outside the window. The window doesn't need to become a better version of a window. It just needs to be wiped clean of the dust. Fire the internal manager. Drop the contraction. Leave yourself completely alone, because the life you've been running so hard to fix is already living itself, perfectly, right here. By the way, while you're letting everything be exactly as it is, your ego is probably in the corner, quietly losing its mind. It wants proof. It wants to know, if this me isn't real, then where exactly inside my brain does it live? Well, modern neuroscience actually found the exact coordinates, and that's exactly what we're going to dissect in the next episode. See you there.